Welcome to the Property Pod with Moneyweb. The property sector is an ever-changing sector, and in this podcast series, your host Suren Naidu chats to movers and shakers in the property industry.
Hi there, and welcome to the Property Pod, South Africa's leading property investor podcast right here on Moneyweb, which also features as a vodcast on our YouTube channel, Moneyweb TV. It is Youth Month in the country, and this week we have another youth-focused podcast, or rather guest. We are speaking to one of the executives of one of South Africa's leading enterprise development initiatives, and that is Property Point. Desigan Chetty is the COO of Property Point, and he joins us now to talk about their efforts on the youth front. Obviously, they have a broader mandate and have been going for a number of years. Desigan, welcome to the Property Pod.
Thank you so much, Suren, and thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
It's Property Point, but this is the Property Pod. Obviously, Property Point has been going for quite a while. Before we dive into what Property Point is doing in the youth empowerment or enterprise development space around the younger side of the population, for our listeners who are not aware of Property Point, obviously we have a broader listenership, even though we do have a very strong property following. Desigan, can you briefly highlight what Property Point does, how long it has been going, and how it all started?
Yeah, thanks so much, Suren. So Property Point, believe it or not, is 18 years old this year. We're actually turning 19 in August. And since our inception, our focus has really been around economic inclusion and socio-economic development in the property sector and the built environment. Our tagline is transforming the industry. And so Property Point has really become a platform for economic transformation. It actually started off as an initiative, an enterprise and supplier development initiative of Growth Point Properties, with the objective of driving supplier diversity and supplier integration. And there was a real focus on equipping emerging Black-owned and Black women-owned businesses to play a key role within the sector. And typically these were the entrepreneurs, who are your subcontractors. They are the guys who are actually doing the work. And so through our intervention, it's really around identifying the potential in them and bringing them to the fore to ultimately become the main contractors within the industry. But having said that, we work across the property value chain. And I think the best way that we describe it is, any service related to erecting a building and then the maintenance of that building, as well as the professional services associated around that building structure, are the kind of entrepreneurs that we would work with.
Now, 18 years is a long time. I know Growth Point launched it, and obviously I've met Sean Tineson, who's the CEO. And we've actually had him on some of our other shows. It's the first time, interestingly enough, because Growth Point is such a big company, it's the first time that we have Property Point on this podcast. So it's quite cool that it's during Youth Month. But before we go into other aspects, you talked about Growth Point, but you do have support from other players. I have a question around the youth specifically, but I see that it's also the IDC and other property players that are also backing Property Point.
Yeah, that's correct. So in addition to Growth Point, who is still an anchor partner to the program, we also work with almost 55% of the other listed REITs. And in addition to that, also working with the public sector. So for instance, SETFA, who's the Small Enterprise and Development Finance Agency, we are recognized as an incubator and accelerator as part of the SETFA business incubation network in South Africa. And of course, we are also an implementation partner to the IDC as well for some of their their mass scale youth employment programs as well. So really, Property Point has really become a platform for public and private sector collaboration.
We'll get to the PPP side in a mo, but yourself, how long have you been with Property Point? And, maybe you want to highlight some of your key responsibilities as COO at the organization.
So I've been with Property Point now for about 8.5 years in the capacity of Chief Operating Officer. And my responsibility is really to oversee the running of all of our programs nationally with the various partners in the private sector, the public sector, but also international partners and funders that we work with, the likes of the International Labour Organization, as well as the Townships Project, which is a Canadian-based non-profit organization who also funds some of our work in the township economy.
I don't know if we got into it, but how long have you been with the organization? And I thought I'd ask a tongue-in-cheek question. How old are you?
So I've been with the organization for 8.5 years now. I'm actually turning 47 tomorrow, so I'm certainly beyond the youth category. But, with the work that we do in the development space, I think certainly keeps me young at heart. And it's something that I passionately enjoy.
Sorry about that. I just thought I'm also in the 40s, so stranger there. But on a serious note, why does youth empowerment matter in our country, and what are some of the initiatives that Property Point is driving on this front?
Yeah. No, I think certainly, youth unemployment is such a critical challenge for us in South Africa, Suren. The youth unemployment rate, I think, in Q1 this year was around 46%, according to Stats SA. And so there's a real opportunity for us to find pathways to get the young people, productive and really contributing to the economy meaningfully. And I think if we are able to solve the youth unemployment challenge, then, we will be able to find a real growth pathway for the country out of some of the difficult economic situations that we find ourselves in. But of course, this is not just locally, but it's also globally. So some of the key initiatives that we are involved in as Property Point, I'll highlight a couple. So we've recently launched a real estate incubator where we are targeting the placement of almost 700 young people over the next 2 years. This initiative has been launched with the support of the IDC through the National Pathway Management Network Innovation Fund, which is a grant initiative of the Department of Employment and Labour, specifically under the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. And so the program is also being funded by a private sector impact investor, which is E Squared. And the opportunity here that we are looking at is to create pathways for young people into the real estate sector. And we know real estate, to become a real estate agent is a commission-based role. And this becomes exceptionally difficult for young people who don't necessarily have a financial backing if they are still waiting for properties to be sold or rented. So it makes it, extremely difficult, more especially for young Black youth who don't necessarily have this backing. So what we've decided to do is to come up with a package which incorporates a level of financial support. So where these would-be agents would get a 4-month stipend, they would get access to work readiness support, mentorship, even equipment if they needed a computer to kind of register their sales and to do their listings, as well as provide them with support towards their regulator fee through the PPRA, their regulatory fee. So we looked at this and we thought, if we are able to put these elements in place, it creates a longer runway for these potential real estate agents, and it allows them then to carve a pathway into the sector, which is also a sector that is relatively untransformed when it comes to, young Black people finding a pathway for themselves. So to date, we are about 12 months into the program. We've placed about 476 young people into the real estate industry with some of the leading brands. We're currently working with about 30 leading brands across 100 national offices. And so it's also really pleasing that about 56% of these young people are female and 81% are Black. So the pathway that we are really looking to create here is for them to become full-scale, real estate agents. But in the absence of that, they're able to use the skills coming out of this program, which is typically your sales, your negotiation skills, to also get into complementary industries like financial services. So I think it really does present, a great opportunity for young people. The other program that we are running is the Social Employment Fund. So this is a program also through the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative that's administered by the IDC. And what we are doing here, Suren, is that we are placing more than 1,000 youth in artisanal pathways in the property sector and built environment, specifically in the theme of installation, repair, and maintenance. which is actually a significant pathway to creating job opportunities for young people, not only locally, but globally as well. And so these 1,000 young people are being placed through the network of Property Point entrepreneurs, municipalities that we are working with, as well as community-based organizations. And they are focusing more on work for the common good when it comes to public infrastructure projects, which I think we know as South Africa, there's going to be a huge infrastructural boom, and we need to make sure that we have these skills readily available. And this is where, we feel young people a real advantage to get into a sector which is typically, not a sexy sector when it comes to repairs and maintenance, but it certainly drives, opportunity within the sector. And ultimately what we're looking for is for young people, through this program to look at self-income generation, to look at entrepreneurship as a pathway, as well as possibly to be absorbed, into existing roles and jobs within the sector. The other flagship initiative that we are involved with is that we have an artisanal hub in the west of Johannesburg, in the Kagiso area. And that artisanal hub focuses on skills for plumbers, electricians, and diesel mechanics. And so it's certainly, targeting young people in those areas where there's a severe lack of those skills. And they also get access to, workshops and tools, as well as, office space where they are potentially looking to run their businesses.
Thanks for that. I'm sure there's a lot more initiatives, especially considering Property Point has been going for almost 20 years. I like the side around artisanal, you look at plumbers with this concern around AI taking jobs. Very often when you become a successful entrepreneur, the entrepreneur needs a skill in the industry. You're not creating tenderpreneurship kind of entrepreneurs. You're creating entrepreneurs that actually have the skill in the sector. So it'll be exciting to see what that translates into over the next few years and decades. Now, Desigan, driving entrepreneurship is a key part of Property Point's mandate, especially around enterprise development. But for young entrepreneurs, it's not that easy, is it? I know, often funding is talked about, so we don't need to go too much into that side of things. But, it's very challenging for young entrepreneurs getting into the industry, doesn't matter what industry they are, never mind property.
No, absolutely, Suren. I think, it is a challenge for young people, coming into the sector and wanting to pursue entrepreneurship. But I think it's also due to structural access challenges as opposed to capability constraints. I think we do have, from what we've seen certainly through our programs and these interventions I've mentioned earlier on, there's certainly a pool of capable young people out there. I think the challenge that they have, other than access to finance, is access to good networks. It's access to information. And sometimes democratizing access to information becomes so important for young people, and especially young entrepreneurs. The other challenge, of course, is access to market opportunities that we often speak about as Property Point, because our approach around business support and development is demand-led. So all of our interventions and our support have to follow where the market opportunities are. Because if we are not doing that, we are doing a disservice to young people and to entrepreneurs by just, placing them in training interventions, passive training interventions. Rather, our approach is very much action-orientated. We want to know where the opportunities are, and we want to find out, what is it going to practically take for these young people to get access to those opportunities, but more importantly, to deliver on those opportunities. So training and capacitation is important, but buyers and access to procurement pathways become more important for young people to be able to grow sustainable businesses. I think some of the other challenges that young people face, particularly coming into the property industry, it's a big industry, but it's also very small, and it's a trusted industry. It's a networked industry. And sometimes compliance challenges become a barrier to some of these young people being able to access these opportunities. Supplier vetting and these processes that, small businesses need to have in place up front. And of course, there's a cost associated with that. And sometimes they don't always have the cost to be able to meet the compliance obligations. And I think this is where, unfortunately, many youth businesses are actually kept out of established supply chains as a result of some of these exclusionary measures.
Thanks for that, Jessica. In terms of Property Point, we know the history with Growth Point and now partnerships with various organizations, including the IDC. More recently, you talked about international associations as well. That's almost like public-private partnerships in action. But do you need more support to make a bigger difference? Particularly in the youth entrepreneurship space in South Africa, how much of support do you get and what can you do, maybe a appeal to action for further support to make a bigger difference in the industry, not just property?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know the scale of the challenge out there, Suren, around unemployment. And in as much as, we work with several partners, it certainly isn't enough across both, the public sector, the private sector, civil society, international partners. And I think for us to create a meaningful, sustainable solution around youth unemployment, we really need to investigate things at a systemic level. So we need to understand how the system works. We need to understand, who are the people that we are solving this challenge for, and really take a market systems based approach to understand how we are going to solve this challenge. Because, of course, we want to reduce this figure significantly over a period of time. And I think it's only through all these stakeholders coming together, because I think everyone has the same objective and they want to achieve the same level of impact. It's around how do we get there? And I think certainly Property Point has really positioned itself as an organization that can be a trusted implementation partner, that can be this nexus or platform for all these stakeholders to come together for us to really achieve a broader economic outcome, not only for the sector, but for the country, and to ensure that ultimately we are promoting a vibrant youth entrepreneurship sector.
Thanks for that. There seems to be greater interaction between government and business on a high level from the likes of the Business Leadership South Africa and BUSA. But, within the context of South Africa's reform process, there has been a number of public sector initiatives and maybe too many organizations. Property Point has proved itself. So it's good to see that the public sector is also getting involved with private sector-led initiatives that probably can get more bang for their buck and, has more rules around how money is spent and that sort of thing. But we won't go into the controversial side of things there because you're representing the private sector. Property Point more broadly, its overall impact, it's almost, you say 19 years. Next year will be 2 decades. What has its overall impact been in the enterprise development space? Because you've impacted a lot of businesses and one could argue created a lot of employment opportunities.
Yeah, certainly. So as an impact-driven organization, for us, it's all around measurable outcomes. And over the past almost 19 years, we've worked with more than 565 entrepreneurs and small businesses. Those entrepreneurs, Suren, have been able to create more than 8,400 direct jobs and work experiences. We've also been able to train, more than 12,000 entrepreneurs through various interventions to share entrepreneurial information with them. And I think, the most pleasing stat for us, Suren, is the ability of those more than 565 small businesses to have unlocked more than 2.5 billion worth of market opportunities and contracts within the property value chain. And I must just emphasize that this is not a pipeline number. I would argue that the pipeline number and the opportunity number is closer to about 8 billion. And what we track and measure is the actual conversion of revenue into these businesses over the past 19 years. And that's been, 2.5 billion, which I think, really shows a level of a sustainable impact. One may argue that 565 businesses is not a big number, but those businesses have been able to create a significant number of work opportunities and also, downstream work opportunities into the local communities in which they operate, which is also very powerful in terms of driving, broad-based economic empowerment.
I'm glad you mentioned broad-based because one would think with the support that those businesses get, they would have supported micro businesses themselves, considering where they've come from. Desigan, I know we a little bit over time, but the organization Property Point, you had opinion piece recently that concedes that, the property and construction sectors have high barriers to entry with procurement processes that are often difficult for emerging businesses to navigate. I know you talked about the high barrier to entry, but can you share some comments further around this and how Property Point is helping on that front?
Yes. So because our approach is very much demand-led, Suren, we work directly with the buyers and the procurement teams within the various partner organizations that fund and support our work. And that's important for us because we need to understand, where are the next wave of opportunities coming from? And how are we able to effectively position the businesses that we are working with to meet those market opportunities? And ultimately, that creates sustainability to their business models. But compliance becomes an important part of the process. I can tell you from experience that many small businesses fail because their compliance is simply not in order. And this is not complicated stuff. It's your taxes, it's your COIDA, it's sometimes your technical certifications that you may need to meet as part of a tender requirement. It's sometimes insurance and guarantees, which in some instances, may not be necessary for a RFP in the initial bidding process. But once you are able to identify the right businesses and convince them why they need the insurance and guarantees, then they are able to actually get those guarantees because there's a financial implication. And now they are able to do so because they have a contract that they are able to base those fees on. So from what we see, there's still a lot of challenges around that for small businesses. And we actually work with them in a very structured way to make sure that in the first year of a 2-year program, that we focus on the business fundamentals. Let's make sure that all your compliance is in place. And for us to do that, for instance, we also partner with some of the technical institutions within the sector. We also partner with industry associations to make sure that these entrepreneurs or young people are able to access these certifications to qualify for the opportunities. The one practical example I always use, Suren, is around painting. So if a local entrepreneur wants to paint the local mall, they don't necessarily know that sometimes that they would have to be an accredited applicator in either Plascon, Dulux, or Promac. And, these painting brands are well known in local communities. And, one would argue any small business who operates in this repair and maintenance space would have picked up a painting brush and they would have bought one of these products to paint. However, when you are looking to paint for a large property fund or a property company, you have to make sure that you are accredited to one of these painting brands. And sometimes small businesses don't know that purely out of ignorance, that, if they are able to become a certified applicator of Plascon, for instance, it entitles them to certain guarantees, to certain products. And from a property partner perspective, these are the risk mitigation measures that they are looking for when they are looking to bring on a new service provider. So we would, for instance, work with the likes of a Plascon, identify local painters who have been painting for years, but don't necessarily have the accreditation, and put them through an applicator course over 3 to 6 months. And at the end of that period, now we've actually broken the barrier for them to get access to painting for some of the large property funds out there, which in the past they would have never otherwise have had access to. So it's really around looking around these challenges in a very practical way, especially for youth entrepreneurs, and finding ways to democratize access to information, to networks, to this kind of technical support that is needed within the sector, especially where, there's a lack of these professional certifications. So we are able to link entrepreneurs and young businesses to be able to get access to these learnership pathways so that ultimately at the end of the day, they are able to qualify for opportunities within the market and hopefully access it in a way that builds sustainability to their businesses.
Desigan, thank you for that. I'm sure there's a lot of examples around that, the tangible examples, as it were. I'm sure Property Pod and, some of the successful entrepreneurs will find space on some of our other podcasts. We've launched a new podcast called Mzansi Business, which focus on the SME sector other than our radio shows. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it. For our listeners and viewers, I'm wearing a Bafana shirt. It's been recorded, this podcast, a few days before we play Canada in the next match. So this is going to be published on Tuesday. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a win over the weekend.
Yep.
But Desigan, thank you for your time. I'm sure you'll have a great weekend. Desigan is the COO of Property Point.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Property Pod with Suren Naidu. To listen to more episodes, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates.